And so welcome everyone. This is Black DVM Network's event with Compassion First Pet Hospitals. They are a gold partner of ours and a very, very strong supporter of Black DVM Network. So they will be around, get very familiar with them. Today we're talking about the Catalyst ER Mentorship Program that Compassion First Pet Hospitals offers. And so we have Dr. Anastasio, who's from New York City. There he earned his undergrad degree in biology at the City University of New York. He then attended Ross University and completed his clinical year at UPenn. So after a rotating internship at the Animal Medical Center in Manhattan, he was accepted into the Emergency Critical Care Residency Program at Tufts. He's board certified and a diplomate of the American College of Veterinary Emergency and Critical Care. And his interests include respiratory medicine, hemodynamic optimization, and trauma. So very, very smart man. These are all words that I am not sure what they mean. So, but he serves as the medical, he serves as the medical director at VRC, and he also founded the Compassion First Pet Hospitals Mentorship Program and has grown it over the years. So as a criticalist, he'll be discussing the various aspects of working in this environment and the difference between emergency critical care, ER, and a hospitalist. So thank you so much, Dr. Anastasio, for taking the time to hang with us and answer questions.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to share this information with everybody this evening. So, I mean, growing up in this field, emergency was always near and dear to my heart. I started as an emergency technician in New York and always wanted to do this. And knowing, like, to be an emergency doctor, it would really have taken an internship, like a full rotating internship. It was a lot for me to take on. I really liked it. I ended up doing a residency, but that's not for everyone, right? So as I finished, people typically that were in ER tended to do internships prior to taking an emergency position. As schools over the more recent years have, advised students not to do internships, the leap from, a graduating student to an emergency doctor in an emergency and referral clinic it's a bit of a leap, knowledge base wise, tempo wise, being able to see a lot of cases, deal with the high emotional situations. So if new grads aren't really doing internships very often any longer, we decided to do like a truncated version of an internship that was aimed at really focusing on emergency and critical care over a short period of time. Preparing new grads for the knowledge base, the pace it takes to work in the ER, how to communicate effectively with owners and with colleagues, how to navigate between the ER and specialties, etc. So the Catalyst program was born out of really necessity because emergency doctors are so incredibly important. Like emergency medicine is, I have significant bias as it pertains to this particular topic, but I feel emergency and critical care is like the most important part of the hospital. Why? Because we're always there. We know a little bit about everything, and we're really there to serve the patients, 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. Right? And that's a significant need within the community. So, the program is born out of necessity. We really need to fill ER spots, right? The world has exploded in terms of caseload. There's so many pets that require our care in the world, and there are a number of ER like slots or positions, around the country that need to be filled. Everyone knows this is a very common thing. Jobs everywhere. The question is, how do we prepare for those jobs? How do we adequately set ourselves up for success? It's really easy to not really know what you're getting into as a new grad. In school, you may have some ER exposure, but you may not have a lot of ER exposure depending on the program that you're in. So the Catalyst program is really aimed at immersion, right? So it's a mentorship program. So you're never really left alone. You have a criticalist and experienced emergency doctors with you at all times. It's typically daytime hours. We do 512s with our catalysts. Our catalysts see cases primarily, speak with owners, do physical exams, create treatment plans, and execute the treatment plans. They can take hospitalized patients, they can see outpatients. I think one of the benefits of our hospital in particular is that, our Catalyst can follow cases. So in a traditional internship program, you may have the intern that's on emergency, the intern that's on surgery, the intern that's on like internal medicine, et cetera. But in this particular instance, we don't have rotating interns. So hypothetically, if you diagnose a hemoabdomen splenic mass in the ER, and if, time willing, you're able to go into the OR with that dog, with the surgeon, see that, and then you can recover the patient, write its treatment sheet, and kind of take it on a daily basis to kind of follow that case. That's the ideal scenario. So you can kind of, see cases from start to finish. Our caseload is robust at our hospital in particular, and I think that's a good thing. Honestly, I wish it was a bit slower at times for Catalyst so we could really sit down and dissect cases. But at the same time, I think it's important to understand how busy ERs can be and what it means to basically go from case to case and multitask. Multitasking is one of the most important characteristics that an emergency doctor can have. So, not only case management and immersion, but also the ability to multitask is part of that program. So immersion is 90% of what goes on. Case-based discussions, morning rounds to speak about cases. And then we also have didactics. So we do, weekly topic rounds to kind of bolster our, experiential information with a little bit more kind of book knowledge. So whereas the vast majority of it truly is immersion, there is some didactic training as well. The interns or the catalysts in our hospital aren't treated as, a number. We're not throwing people at a caseload. I think that's the absolute wrong thing to do. And I think where probably a lot of internships got a bad name, we don't necessarily need catalysts at the hospital, right? We want catalysts at the hospital because we want to, get new grads started on the right foot, have a good experience in the field, and be able to take the knowledge base on to a respective hospital. So how does it work? So, I've certainly kept catalysts on at my hospital. So I'll hire them, they're new grads, I train them, and then 4 months later, they come on as emergency doctors and work the schedule. But the majority of people that I've trained were hired at hospitals that were not mine. So other network hospitals within the Compassion First network. So hypothetically, if you interview at AERA at North Jersey or Red Bank in North Jersey, Central Jersey, I don't know, part of Jersey. And then, being a new grad, you need a little bit of extra kind of training. You come to VRC. We put you up in an apartment right across the street at no cost to you for the entire time that you're at VRC, which is the 4 months. You work 5/12s, and then at the end of the program, you are basically sent back to your respective hospital to continue on as an emergency doctor in that emergency schedule. So it's definitely a lot of hours as a catalyst. I mean, it's really like, we kind of thought of it as like a boot camp to start, right? We thought of it as like a real like heavy dose of emergency so that you see how hard it can be to put a lot of hours in. And then when you go to 3/12s, you're like, wow, I got a lot of time on my hands, which is really nice. So that's basically the Catalyst program. I'm sure that I left some stuff out, and I'd love to be able to answer questions for everybody.
So anyone that has a question, feel free to unmute yourself, come off video, or turn on your video if you like, and ask your question. Again, I'm just asking that you just give us a little idea of where you are in your journey. So if you're a vet student, what year you are, if you're a new grad, if you're looking to transition into ER, if you're already there. So what questions do you guys have?
I have a question. I'm Dion. I'm a second-year vet student. I've just started to immerse myself in the world of ER medicine since this summer. I started working at a veterinary emergency group as an assistant, and they're kind of training me while we have online school, which is nice. My question is, what is the ratio of catalysts in the program to like criticalists or mentors? And how close is that relationship?
That's an excellent question. So it depends on the cycle. So we've taken a fair number of Ross grads because Ross University, first of all, I went to Ross, so I have a particular soft spot for the university. Secondly, they finish on off time. So we don't just start in, say, June. So in June, we take the most. So that's like maybe 2 to 3 at a time. Otherwise, it's usually 2. We have 3 criticalists and 10 emergency doctors at the hospital. So, that's like an excellent ratio. And the relationship is, there's usually one criticalist on, from 8 to 8, 7 days a week. So you always have critical care available to you. And then you have an emergency doctor at 8 o'clock in the morning, then 10 o'clock in the morning, then noon, and then overnight at 8. So there's never a shortage of people to bounce ideas off of and cases off of. And that's the expectation within the hospital, is that, the staff is made available to speak, with the Catalyst and support them. So we don't really let anybody go rogue. I mean, it's really a closely monitored situation.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, do the Catalysts in terms like have a relationship with each other? I guess in their cycle, how is that?
That's an excellent question. So we've had like an amazing group like come through, so incredibly diverse. I think that there's like, you bond over an experience, like it's hard. I'm not gonna pull any punches. It's hard to work 60 plus hours a week, in a high emotional area such as emergency. It's difficult. But I feel like you band together, with your Catalyst mates. I think you band together with, like I said, I have people who work in the emergency department that were Catalysts, so they understand the process as well. Everybody kind of lives together. There's like a 3-bedroom apartment. So, yes, I think there is a camaraderie amongst the group. They tend to like walk over together or drive over together and talk a lot amongst one another. So I would say, absolutely, 100%. Yes.
The only thing I would add to what Dr. Anastasio has said, Dijon, is, at his hospital, we have a unique situation where we have an apartment and the Catalyst, mentees live together. But one of the things that Dr. Anastasio neglected to talk about is something that I believe he was behind putting together. Moving forward, we're going to have a Teams channel. So to your point about mentees being able to communicate to each other, there will be a designated Teams channel for Catalyst. So if you were at his hospital versus another hospital, you will be able to have a communication, and console each other or whatever that might be, talk about interesting cases. But there will be a dialogue between to link our hospitals, so that's really the idea, is that whether you're, with Dr. Anastasio at VRC in Pennsylvania, or you're at a hospital, a Compassion First hospital in Florida, or, Arizona, wherever you are, that there's a consistent, the training is consistent, and that there is a dialogue, and you have kind of a lifeline, to bounce ideas off of and questions.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Hi, my name is Autumn. I'm a 4th year at Cornell, and I actually know Dion. So I was wondering so I know that you guys all have very large specialty hospitals, and with that comes other boarded specialties, most likely surgery. I know there's, from my talks with different emergency practices, that there's a big debate whether emergency clinicians should cut or not. And in the Catalyst program, are you guys not focused on the surgical skills of an emergency veterinarian, or more kind of like a criticalist who doesn't really cut but manages the case?
That's a good one. So, that's a lot to expect out of a program, is to be able to do the medical work and surgical work. So you'll do wound care, lacerations, little things like that. But to be able to get into the OR often enough to be proficient in abdominal surgery and emergency surgeries, I would be remiss to think that is possible. So the goal of the program is really medical and some ER-based surgical, really, like I said, wounds, et cetera, knowledge. So yes, to some degree, you have more of a criticalist that doesn't cut type of kind of tilt, but only because of really time constraints.
Okay, so at another hospital, would, after I come out of the Catalyst program, say, would I be expected to cut, or will I be given more time? Or is that something even the ER doctors do at other practices?
Well, so we have several emergency doctors that do surgery at our hospital, and 2 of them have been through the Catalyst program. Neither of them learned surgery necessarily in the Catalyst program. I think that your question is very reasonable, but is incredibly hospital dependent. You're right. There are some places that, nobody wants emergency doctors to cut. It should only be specialists, but then they have a limited number of surgeons and the surgeons don't want to be on call. I mean, there's a lot wrapped up into your question, and I think it's incredibly individualized. I think I can really answer based on my experience in my hospital, which is, although I don't expect emergency doctors to cut straight out of, say, internship, we do offer, like, hypothetically, if you were to stay on at VRC, we would get you in the OR with our emergency doctors and with our surgeons to be trained on it, if that's something you want to do. Again, once you've exercised a good amount of medical, prowess, because quite frankly, it only makes you better and more marketable as a clinician. Quite frankly, hypothetically, you go into general practice, right? You can cut. That's incredibly lucrative for you moving forward. The more surgeries you guys can do, I don't know how many vet students there are here, but here's a little tip, write this down, learn surgery, because you will be indispensable at the hospitals in which you are hired. And so this type of, if you can get yourself into a place that says, yeah, we want you to cut, that's only going to make you a better doctor in the long term. Now, it's going to take you a year or 2 to really be proficient in abdominal surgery, truthfully, because you're not going to go in that often. The opportunities to actually get in with an emergency, with a surgeon, maybe few and far between. Maybe you've got to put the effort and come in on your day off, which sounds like a reasonable plan right now, but once you start working and you've got a life, you may not want to do it. But my strong suggestion is, get into a place that you can cut. I'm a believer that nobody holds the key to any kingdom necessarily. There are very few specialties that absolutely have a lock on any specific surgery. I'll give, ophthalmologists and cataract surgery. I don't think anybody should be running around doing cataract surgery and maybe a lot of eye surgeries. But when it comes to abdominal surgeries, anybody should be able to do a GDV, a splenectomy, a resection anastomosis, enterotomy. And if you really want to branch out and do a cholecystectomy, that'd be great. I believe in cross-training. I believe in giving people more skills, allowing them to grow as clinicians, because it helps you, right? In the long run, it makes you a better doctor, but it also, selfishly helps us. Now we have more coverage. The reality of the situation is the more people I have that are highly skilled within my hospital, the better able everybody else is to have a good quality of life and not always be on call. That was a long answer. Did that answer your question though? Sorry.
No, it did. I know it's very hospital dependent. And like you said, it basically depends on the surgeons and how many surgeons they have, or if they don't want to be on call all the time. I've noticed that throughout my brief time in clinics so far, that being on call is a big no, people don't like it.
It's a sticking point. It's a sticking point for sure. And so, from that perspective, as a surgeon, all right, you don't want to be on call. I respect that. So we have to have another plan because patients need this service, right? So how do we get to that point? And I think we get to the point by, training people adequately for, that job.
And the only thing I would add, I get this question a lot, Autumn, on the recruiting side, is I think to Dr. Anastasio's point, the premise of the mentorship program is to get somebody that's either right out of school or maybe trying to transition from general practice into specialty emergency. It's to get them up to speed and that they're ready to take on a shift themselves in ER, and the blinders, they can take the blinders off. They're no longer deer in the headlights. The fear isn't there, right? And so the idea is to prep them for that. And we want to be really focused on that training, and it gets diluted if we're trying to train them to do a little surgery and a little triage. It's really focused more on ER. And again, to your point, hospitals are different, right? But I can tell you right now, all of our hospitals, the ERs are really busy, right? So just trying to get you trained on triage and saving more lives and stabilizing them and then moving them on to surgery is the number one goal. So that's really, to support his point, it's like, great. Like, yeah, it would be great for everybody to do surgery, but in a 6 months time frame, that's a lot to expect on you, as a mentee and the mentors, right? Because it's like we need to walk before we can run. And so we've culled it down to just really focused on ER, emergency medicine, and preparing you to be the best ER doctor you possibly could. By no way, again, it's a boot camp. So nobody's a perfect ER doctor in 6 months. We have ER doctors that have been doing it for 25 years. They still see things sometimes that they've never seen, right? So.
So I have a quick question, and this is coming from the standpoint of, if I'm in my 4th year of veterinary school and I'm wondering if I should go into an internship or, pursue an internship in order to pursue a residency. What are the benefits of coming into the Catalyst program over pursuing a traditional internship?
So I think timing wise, I mean, the biggest, it's kind of a time saver. I was an intern. I'm going to tell you that I did a lot of people's paperwork for 75% of the year. Or I retracted for surgery, whatever. I value my internship. I think if you even want to consider an internship, I say do it. I'm not trying to detract from that. I think it's a very important, thing to be able to do. But we are so incredibly ER focused. And that's the thing about an internship. The reality is you are there for ER shifts. They just gussy it up with having to hang with an internist or a surgeon or whatever. If you want to, I see you smirking there, Carrie. It's true. I'm telling you the real situation. Internships you are there for emergency. And if anybody tells you otherwise, and you believe them, they're good liars. So, the reality is that we've taken all that fluff out and we're trying to make, people, good emergency doctors in a short period of time. So the biggest, benefit is that you're not just there to do somebody else's paperwork. You're there to learn and you're there to see cases with support.
The only thing I would add was that obviously, if you want to go on and be a criticalist like Dr. Anastasio, this doesn't help you, right? It's just delaying the inevitable. You need to do the internship to then get into the residency, right? So if there's any 4th years that I'm talking to and they're kind of on the fence, I encourage them to do a rotating internship, right? Because then they are getting in the ER, they're getting emergency experience. And if they still want to fall back and they're like, nope, I'm 100% certain now, I want to do ER, then great. They had a 1 year catalyst, basically, right? I mean, they're very prepared and experienced in ER. But this is really for those people that have decided they definitely want to go into emergency medicine. They don't have any interest in doing an internship or, and sometimes that's financial driven. They don't want to spend a year making intern pay, and they know that they want to go into emergency medicine. This is really our answer to that. It's our, because we don't want to just throw them in a hospital. We want to make sure that they come in, there's structure, there's mentoring, there's training, we have a checklist. And that's for both the mentor and the mentee, right? To keep everybody on track of making sure that we're getting through the topics we need to get through within that first 6 months of employment.
That sounds good. Thank you so much. I mean, I think it's super important because I would love to hop into a couple ER shifts, just on my days off or, after work, but I don't feel confident enough to walk in and say I'm ready to take on an ER shift by myself. I would definitely need mentorship for that. Other questions that you guys have about, maybe you don't have questions about specifically the Catalyst program. Maybe you have questions for Dr. Anastasio about critical care. in emergency medicine.
Yeah, I
Go
have a quick question, if that's okay.
ahead, Brina.
So my name is Brina. I'm a fourth year Rossi. Yeah. So my question is, so this is a 6-month program for mentorship focused, like ER. Do you guys do like a mid program like evaluation to see how the person is growing in the program, or like just touch base with them and see like, hey, you're weak in this. This is what we think you should improve on. Just want to see like how that goes.
Yes. I live my life in a somewhat unstructured manner. I will tell you, I do it in a rolling fashion. So if I see things, kind of either on the fly, I might have like an individual conversation with you. But also, we take like a monthly opportunity round about 1 monthly opportunity to sit down and chat about what's your experience? Like, how are you liking it? What can we do better for you? And also, this is what we're noticing. This is the feedback that we're getting from people. And there's been some discussion about having like everybody's input in terms of like all the emergency doctors and criticalists, and kind of like a nice like Survey Monkey type format. So kind of making it a little bit more formalized. So yes, the conversations happen. I believe over the next probably 4 months, it's going to be a little bit more formalized. Where are you doing your clinics?
I'm at Michigan.
I like it.
I like it. It's just cold. I'm not used to the weather. But
A little different than St. Kitts.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm from Alabama, so like I've never been around snow like this before. So, yeah.
Lots of snow.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I think about the Catalyst that I think differentiates our program a little bit from maybe some of the other programs is just the fact that, at VRC, Dr. Anastasio's hospital, he takes no more than 3 people at a time, right? So you're getting more one-on-one, undivided attention. Like if there's one of the 3 that's not, they're struggling in one area or the other, he immediately can see that and adjust, right? Like maybe you need more help in client communication. Maybe one person needs more medicine. I mean, we cover the whole spectrum, to make you a real well-rounded ER doctor. So, it's not like he's trying to mentor 10 people at a time, right? It's a select number of people, and it allows you to give really more personalized attention and focus and see those, those things pop up a little bit easier than if you're trying to mentor a really large group of people.
Dr. Anastasio, there was a question in the chat about imaging. Is imaging a part of the program? Can you speak a little bit on that?
That's a good question. So right now, there is every other week radiology rounds. We would like to make them network wide. That's certainly the goal. And in terms of like the practice of imaging, I mean, we have all the modalities, other than like PET scan, I would say, and scintigraphy. So we have CT, MRI, ultrasound, digital. And we have a very nice ER ultrasound unit. So you're expected to read radiographs. We have 2 radiologists that will also help you read those radiographs. And in terms of like ER ultrasounds, like AFAST, TFAST, looking at, cardiac function, systolic function of the left ventricle, or LAAO, so the ratio of the aorta to the left atrium, for cases that you suspect there may be left-sided congestive heart failure. So there is a lot of opportunity for that type of imaging, which I think is extraordinarily important. I mean, don't tell my mentors this, but the ultrasound is practically part of our physical exam at this point. So yeah, I mean, that ultrasound is a big part of what we do. And also there's a lot of ultrasound coverage. So especially in the ER, when you're like trying to figure stuff out as quickly as humanly possible, it's nice to have somebody that like does diagnostic ultrasounds. And we have like a lot of people in the hospital that can do that, which is extraordinarily helpful. Did that answer the imaging question? Was there anything more specific than that?
I asked the question, and no, I think that's good. I just I do ER relief, and ultrasound is, like you said, one of the things I do the most with every exam. So I just wanted to make sure that was a part of the program. And actually, relief added Compassion First Hospital, but I've never heard of this program. So that's why I wanted to hear about what you guys had going on. So
what hospital were you?
Animal Emergency Hospital in North Texas in Grapevine. So. Can't hear you.
Ramirez?
Yeah.
Nice.
Are you sure?
Really good hospital.
I keep losing you, sorry.
Perfect. Other questions that you have?
This is Chris Hollingsworth. I'm a second year at Virginia, Maryland. Hey, everyone. So I just had a quick question about whether or not you have any feedback from like your previous doctors that have worked under you, and I guess how their comfort level changed over the program, especially towards the end. And is this program, has it been sufficient enough for them to land spots at different clinics, different ER clinics full time?
Good questions. So number one, you technically are hired within the Compassion First network prior to starting the job. So you already have a job, which is nice. Only one of the catalysts that I'm aware of is no longer at his hospital, but they're still working emergency. I would say that the feedback that I've gotten, listen, the reality is working 60 hours a week isn't for everybody. It's real hard work, right? So I feel that the vast majority of people who have finished enjoyed the program and found it worthwhile. I think during it, people have like, oh, this is really hard, it's really hard. But I think afterwards, the feedback that I've gotten is that it's been a really great experience for them and set them on the right trajectory. I think another important thing for me to say, besides that it's really hard work, is that you get in or you get out really what you put in, right? So this is not in any way, shape, or form like a hand-holding program, right? That's not how I was trained. That's not how most of my emergency doctors were trained. You have to show interest. You have to be present. You have to want to take cases. You have to want to read about cases. You want to have to want to interact with colleagues and specialists, et cetera. So there's a large onus on the people within the program, to dictate their own success. I can't show you, like how to be an emergency doctor without wanting to be taught. And wanting to be taught, isn't something you just say, it's action, right? So I find that the people that have been the most successful within the program are those that really immerse themselves fully into understanding in the program and understanding like, I really need to put in this work because I have a very short amount of time to learn as much as possible before I'm working like weekend overnights by myself, hypothetically, at my respective hospital, right? So yeah, short answer is I think most people, I have had contact. I still get text messages from my mentees all the time, asking me about cases and stuff. So it's a nice little network of people and colleagues that has grown, over the years. And I'm excited to keep growing it. It's a pretty cool thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, Christopher, to that point, just from a recruiting standpoint, to support what Dr. Anastasio said, yes, when the candidates, typically they end up in the recruiting department, and we work with each candidate to figure out what's the best hospital for you. Where do you need to be? And then we figure out which hospital is going to do the mentoring. So I'm not for sure if you were on at the very beginning when Dr. Anastasio was saying, his hospital, for instance, he's knock on wood, he does an amazing job at retention. So he oftentimes, every once in a while, he'll train somebody for his own hospital. But he is what we would call, kind of one of our training hospitals, because he offers to train doctors for, surrounding, well, not necessarily just the immediate surroundings. He recently trained a doctor for one of our hospitals in San Antonio, Texas. So he offers up, his spots. He wants them full, right? Because they want to keep, training more doctors. So that's kind of a unique situation, but nobody enters the program without having a home and already knowing where they're going to be working. And we work through that process to make sure that you have a home. And the other great thing about the program is, I know, I do the research to know what's out there in terms of programs. We start our doctors at full salary. from day one, which is I think a huge selling point. We don't do a tiered structure. Sometimes a hospital will decide to maybe give you a bump, after you've completed the program. But we don't, it's not a tiered structure where you start out making, intern salary and all of a sudden 6 months later, you're making an associate salary. We pay you a decent salary from day one and benefits.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Good question, Chris. So we have Mr. Harold Davis on this call, and he is the emergency critical care guru for RVTs. So if there is anything, Mr. Davis, that you have seen, mistakes that you've seen new grads make, and any case for why new grads need mentorship that you've seen, them wreck their technicians with, please feel free to share that, because you would probably know best, specializing in that area.
Yeah, sure. This has been great. I think everything that's been said about mentorship programs is great. I've been around for many years. I've seen internship programs, and internship programs, a lot of times you're kind of hired to do the emergency work, as was said, and you're kind of thrown into the deep end and you don't really get that mentorship. So if you really have a real strong desire, I think, to be able to get a good foundation, mentorships are probably the way to go. Again, unless you're looking to go towards a specialty certification or board certification, then you might need to do that internship. But what I'm hearing sounds really great.
Awesome. So there is a question in the chat, and it says, Dr. Anastasio mentioned that universities aren't recommending internships as much. Is that? And so she is asking if there's a reason for this. Like, what is your take on why that might be the case?
So I'm just going to be honest here. So I honestly feel that I'll tell you what happened when I was a resident, my own experience. We were sat down by the dean and asked how we could better prepare our students for practice after graduating. And we all looked at one another and said, you can't. I don't understand. What are you talking about? So you learn about large animals, small animals, lab animal, pathology. You learn all these things in your clinical year. You're really unable to focus on any one area. If you want to be a small animal veterinarian, we didn't even have a community practice. I don't even think the students knew how to give a vaccine. So what are we talking about? I don't understand. Well, the reason for that question was because there was a lot of pushback from the veterinary community saying that the students weren't prepared for practice, which I think is a lot to ask. And number two, from the students themselves saying, we're spending $200,000 and you're not even, preparing us for school. Why do we need to do an internship? So instead of addressing the problem, they just started saying, don't do an internship then. You guys are good, go ahead. Which is the absolute wrong approach. I'm sorry, if there's any deans on this right now, I will have a private conversation with you about this, but this is, I think, a fundamental issue that we have in this field. I mean, we all know our human counterparts have to do internships and residencies. It blows my mind that I can have tracked at University X under equine, never done a small animal rotation, but then at the end of it say, man, they don't make a lot of money. I'm going to go be a small animal vet and just be a small animal vet with little to no training. That's the field that we work in. So my opinion is that internships are helpful because the first year out of school is the most important year you will practice. It will set you on a trajectory to be that clinician for the duration, right? You may learn in school how to do a physical exam, how to get a history, but there's always this cloud of I'm just a student. This isn't really my responsibility. I'm learning this, but I'll perfect it later. Well, the later is practice. And now when you're thrown in and the onus is on you, it is your license, it's your responsibility to make sure that patient's getting adequate care. That's when you start to take it seriously. And if you don't have mentorship and backup in those beginning stages, you can learn a lot of mistakes, and those mistakes become second nature, right? those mistakes become what you do on a routine basis. And that's unhealthy for you as a professional, but also your patients. So I truly believe that internships are extraordinarily important. The right internship for the right person. I'm not saying everybody should go out and just do an internship. Like, if you believe that you want to be an emergency clinician, I believe the Criticalist program is an excellent way to do that. If you live in a specific area and there's internship program there, I'd say investigate. What percentage are you on emergency? What percentage are you on overnights? How many emergency clinicians are there? How many criticalists are there? How many internists are there? Surgeons? What exactly are your responsibilities outside of emergency? You have to figure out what's right for you. And the other part of it is I think a lot of internships just didn't do well with the opportunity to train young kids. And I think something that you hear people say, well, I went through it, so they're going to go through it. And that just does not fly anymore, right? Like the world is evolving, and it's evolving more rapidly than veterinary training is. I know like a lot of programs are trying to roll with the punches and be progressive and all these things, but the reality is that, we're always going to be behind the 8 ball. So short story long, universities are wonderful. The training programs are wonderful. I have nothing bad to say about veterinary medicine necessarily, but the reality of the situation is I think it's a tall order for any program to create a finished product at the end of 4 years. That is just not a realistic goal. And that's why, again, I think that an internship at the end of that, whether it's a truncated internship, like a boot camp, like what we have, or a full internship, I think can really only benefit you as a clinician.
Thanks so much.
Woo.
You were in the hot seat for a little bit there.
Yes, Harold. So you're RVT, right? So I thank you for joining us. I want to say another piece, the most important, as new grads, as students, I want to tell you, the people that will make or break your life, your day, and your career are the nurses and technicians that you're working with. I cannot stress enough how important it is to learn from and work with the nursing staff that you have available to you that you're working with. It's so important. I learned more from the nursing staff during my residency than I learned from the clinicians. I mean, it is imperative to understand how important that experience is from the patient care perspective, just the number of years that they've been in the field. I appreciate the nurses you work with and learn from the nurses you work with. It will make your career, I'm telling you.
Preach.
Did someone else have a question that they were going to ask?
I had a question. Hello, I'm a second year vet student at St. George's University. For your program, I'm wondering, is there vetting? How do you choose who gets into the program?
So that's an excellent question. So our process currently is you apply to a respective hospital. Okay. So let's say it's a large, everybody's heard of Red Bank Animal Hospital. You apply to Red Bank Animal Hospital. If Red Bank Animal Hospital feels that you'd be a good person, a good fit, a good clinician, if they want to add you to the team, I'm not really going to say no, but I do require you to come speak with me about the program specifically and what our expectations are for the time that you are at VRC. So the vetting really is like a hiring process. I try not to get in between the hospital that hired you and you. So I will train anybody that they send our way. But the reality is that I just need to have a little bit of input in terms of, I know you're going to work for them, but for the next 6 months, these are our expectations. And you pretty much go through Carrie right now for that. Am I correct, Carrie?
Correct. And then the only thing I would add is, for our other hospitals, that aren't, training, if they're training you for their hospital, it's a traditional interview process, from soup to nuts. I mean, you speak to me, I introduce you to the hospital director, you have a phone conversation with them. If you still both, have warm and fuzzies, they invite you to visit, you come and visit the hospital. Obviously, with COVID, we have a lot of protocols around that, but, following protocols, you meet with all the players necessary. So typically for an ER, young soon to be ER doctor, you obviously meet with the hospital director, medical director, criticalist, ER doctors. We usually always want you to meet technicians. Sometimes they have the most difficult questions. And then depending on the hospital, everybody has their own protocol, but an internist, I mean, they'll throw different people in, but for sure it's hospital director, medical director, ER doctors, ECC. We like to say that, most of the hospitals that are running Catalyst per se, they have Criticalists, right? So you're getting the why behind the medicine versus being trained by ER doctors, where sometimes you might get a lot of do this, do that. I like to say, the idea is that, the Criticalist, I mean, Dr. Anastasio is fortunate because he has 3 at his hospital. So, his hospital, although a busy one, it's ideal because you have 3 people that had extra training. They did the internship, they did the 3 years of residency, and then they became a criticalist. So their knowledge behind emergency is a little more in depth than a traditional ER doctor. And obviously that's why our, robust specialty and emergency hospitals have criticalists. So we tend to our goal is to place Catalyst candidates at those hospitals, right? Because that you're going to get the most robust expert, training, and they're the hospitals that have the most specialists, right? So your caseload is going to vary greater than, so one of our smaller hospitals that maybe is ER, urgent care, they have an internist and a surgeon, right? Maybe they don't have an ECC. So we're trying to put people at the hospitals where even 5 years from now, you might choose to move, and you might move, so you might leave our hospital, right? We want to make sure that we're training doctors for the industry as a whole, and that we're giving you the best foundation possible to be the best ER doctor.
Hey, Tiara, hello, everybody. My name is Doug Brooks. I'm with Compassion First as well, and I've worked pretty closely with Tiara. And this sponsorship program, while Dr. Anastasio has done a great job talking about the Catalyst program, I just want to add a little bit about Compassion First and our efforts with diversity and inclusion. Obviously, supporting the Black DVM network. We've got a couple other things we're doing, but supporting the Black DVM network is one of the things that we're doing. Obviously, there's a lot of self-interest here. Number one, we need more emergency doctors. So that's why the Catalyst program. Number two, we need more minority doctors. So that's why we are supporting the Black DVM network, as well as some other opportunities. But I guess what I want to make sure that you guys are aware of is Compassion First is a specialty emergency network of hospitals of about 45 hospitals. We have recently merged with and become a part of NBA. So now we are a part of a much bigger organization that'll have roughly 100 specialty emergency hospitals and about 700 GP hospitals as well. And so I just want to make sure you guys know exactly who we are. As Tiara mentioned before, this is a long-term sponsorship opportunity that we have with the Black DVM Network. NBA and Compassion First is not going to go anywhere. This might be the first time that you have seen us with the Black DVM Network, but it will not be the last time. And I can also guarantee you that as we become more integrated with the NBA larger network of hospitals, there will be additional opportunities. So right now we on the job board, I know we have the Catalyst program, but we also have some ER positions as well. So again, as we get more immersed with NBA and become more part of their GP network, stay tuned for other opportunities to come from NBA/Compassion First, not just the Catalyst program. Although Dr. Anastasio does a great job with the Catalyst program, that will not be the only opportunity for you guys to work with NBA/Compassion First, right? So thank you very much for being on. I really, really appreciate it. And, I really enjoy support and working with Tiara to identify support for this network. Obviously, we talked to a lot of different programs, a lot of different people about where we wanted to invest our diversity and inclusion dollars. And right after a sponsorship that we were doing at Tuskegee, the Black DVM Network was right up there with the opportunities that we thought could help diversify not only Compassion First, but the entire veterinary industry as well. So thank you.
Yes, we are so grateful for this partnership with Compassion First Pet Hospitals, soon to be NBA merged. So Doug was saying, if you have any questions about who they are as a company, questions outside of the Catalyst program, feel free to reach out to Carrie and to the email addresses listed on their job listing. So the job listings, honestly, even if you're not looking for a job right now, when you go on the job board and you click on a job listing, there's contact info for the people that are hiring for that job. That is your opportunity to get connected with those people, reach out to them, let them know who you are and when you're graduating, when you'll be looking for a job, so that you guys can stay connected. So for students on there, that is free advice for the day from me, my humble free advice. So realize that we are forming a long-term partnership with Compassion First. So if you want to get familiar with them, please do so. And I've been on a few panels this past week with Voice and panels about diversity and inclusion. And the question always comes up, how do I choose a workplace that is inclusive and diverse? How do I know if my company supports DEI efforts? And, a big way to figure out where a company stands on DEI is to see where are they putting their time and money and effort. And so Compassion First has demonstrated a strong effort, not only with Black DVM Network, but with other universities and other programs that show that they are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if you have questions about that too, don't be shy, ask them. We can talk about, the lack of diversity in specialties, right? They're a specialty hospital and they're telling us that there's not a lot of diversity there. And so we can always talk about that, and you can always talk to them about that too.
Thank you.
I had a question. I was wondering about any opportunities for current vet students or students in their clinical year of vet school with the Compassion First hospitals.
Where do you go to school?
I'm a second year at Cornell.
Okay. Not that, Carrie, you may know more than I do, whether there might be some volunteer opportunities or some stuff like that. I do know we have, if there's any Tuskegee students on the line here, we do have some opportunities with Tuskegee as part of our sponsorship with that. And actually, we just finalized that today with Dean Perry at Tuskegee. So any Tuskegee students out there, there's a scholarship opportunity that includes some potential intern and externship opportunities as well as part of our Tuskegee sponsorship. But that's the only thing I'm aware of. Carrie, you probably know more about that than I would.
Yeah, so most of our hospitals focus more on, fourth years during their clinicals. We do have some hospitals, that work with third years, but typically not, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, typically not first and second years, just usually they wait until third year, definitely fourth year. We definitely have some hospitals that are, that take on clinical rotations. Individual hospitals, we don't mandate anything. We're not like the big brother, when it comes to Compassion First. All of our hospitals, if you visit our website to familiarize yourself with more of our hospitals, none of them bear the Compassion First name, and that's really by design. We want them to all have their own unique personality and culture. And to that extent, I typically don't get into, their relationships with students at kind of the first, second year level. But I know some of them, they have relationships with people that, maybe their mom and dad live down the street, their pets go to their hospital, they come home from school in the summertime, at the holidays, they come and work at the hospital, right? So, and that's all managed locally. It's not something that comes through recruiting. So to be honest, I don't have lots of visibility on it. I know I've kind of spot checked the hospitals, and most of them are definitely fourth years. We'll talk to them about coming through, doing an externship, but not so much for first and second years, unless you can build that relationship with kind of your local hospital or, near somebody where you have a place to stay kind of thing, and you can pop in and shadow. But it's really a case-by-case situation. And I would put you directly in touch with the local hospital that made sense for you, and you could talk through that with them. Dr. Anastasio, do you have any experience with that at your hospital?
We definitely take externs in their fourth year. In the past, when we've had either prospective students or students that are earlier in their, veterinary careers, such as like first or second years, what we've tried to do is really pair them with, because this is like summer and winter break opportunities, right? Because they're in school, mostly during the fall and, winter. So we pair them with like the nursing staff from a department for a period of time, and they really act as like assistants. So sometimes that's been paid, sometimes that hasn't been paid. I'm not trying to like I can't really speak to that in detail. It kind of depends on the person, et cetera. But I think that it offers a real good hands-on experience from a different perspective. I think it gives you a greater appreciation for, the inner workings of how the hospital goes, instead of just kind of sitting there and like next to the doctor and kind of like, watching us do paperwork or watching us do a case. I think that perspective early on is extraordinarily helpful. So we do have those opportunities. There's not a ton, like, our bandwidth for that is fairly low, but our hospital manager has been really, really great in getting people in for that type of experience.
So I have a quick question. So I know Carrie just dropped her information in the chat, but if a student says, hey, I'm looking for someplace to extern, and they are in their 4th year and they let us know, do you guys have, relationships and network where we can say, hey, there's a student in, New Jersey that's looking for a hospital to extern at? Is there a hospital that you guys would be able to refer from that's within Compassion First?
Yeah, you can direct that all to me. I can manage that.
Perfect.
Yeah, I would, obviously our bigger hospitals usually play in that realm, like the, Red Bank, Tinton Falls, some of our larger hospitals, they're, capable and used to managing that. I know I just spoke to our hospital down in Estero, FVRC, Florida Veterinary Referral Center. Today I spoke to the hospital director, and she actually had 2 externs there when I was speaking to her. So we definitely have it happens at a lot of our hospitals, kind of a case-by-case situation. And I usually just put them in touch with the hospital director, and they talk about it and see if the timing works and make it happen.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I know that we are coming up on, it's 5 o'clock here on the West Coast, but maybe it's 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock somewhere else. So we won't keep Dr. Anastasio. Maybe we have time for one more question if someone has one.
I do have a question, just real quick. And I mean, I can email you, I do not mind, but do you guys provide benefits along with the salary for the 6 months?
Yes.
Full employment,
yes.
gainful employment. Yep. It's no different than being in the Catalyst program is no different than being at your respective hospital. From day one, you are employed by Compassion First.
Okay.
And our benefit package is pretty standard. I mean, at all of our hospitals, like I said, some hospitals offer, throw a little something in that the other hospital doesn't, because we don't, that's not micromanaged, but our doctors get the same medical coverage that I do. I mean, it's all centralized. So it's medical, dental, vision. We have a 401k program, PTO for doctors. I don't get CE dollars, but doctors typically get a CE allowance. And then, sometimes a bonus, we used to call it a relocation bonus. There's no tax, the government did away with any tax incentives for either party. So now it's just a bonus, but sometimes, the hospital, if a doctor, they finish school on the East Coast and they're moving to the West Coast or vice versa, they'll give them a bonus to help cover the costs of those type of things.
Okay, nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, one more question. I remember you was talking about the like the process of like just basically learning more information about it, but like during like the, I guess like picking the few for this program, do you like request a letter recommendation, or do you request like any like referral from like any other doctors? Just curious on the process.
Do you want me to take that, Dr. Anastasio?
I mean, I just from my perspective, I when you bring a CV or a resume, usually you have some references listed. And so if I know them, or if I know someone that was where you were, I might reach out to them. I'm a big believer in, speaking to someone and kind of getting a feel for them, in conversation. So it's not necessarily a requirement, but just from the perspective of kind of having it available, it's helpful just to kind of know where you've been and who you know.
And the only thing that I would add is, obviously, I know we have a few people in the call that have identified their second years, or, not everybody's a fourth year. It is kind of a first come, first serve for our slots. So, starting conversations on the early side, I would say, is beneficial just to secure your slot. I know, Dr. Anastasio, I think we're about to, we're getting close to your 3 slots being full for June. So, but we have other hospitals, but it is a first come, first serve, typical interview process. We're not looking at, we're not asking for your grades, it's not that kind of thing. It's not as stringent as maybe some of the internship processes, but it's just like if we were hiring any doctor, we want to get to know you, make sure that it's a fit from a recruiting perspective. Other than, geography, which oftentimes drives doctors, I'm really trying to, usually if you've been in school for a while, you haven't had a lot of free time. So from a recruiting perspective, what we're trying to do is really kind of uncover like what really moves you. What are you looking to do? I like to joke, but I tend to play mom a little bit. I'm trying to figure out like where in the world is going to make you happy, right? Like, do you want to be in, do you love the desert, right? Well, I've got a hospital in Phoenix. Do you like to surf? Well, I've got hospitals all up and down the East Coast that, people surf at. Do you want to be near mountains and hiking?
On the West Coast, Carrie, we know that surfing is best on the West Coast.
Well, I have to admit, the only surfing that I have done has been on the West Coast, not the East Coast, because I'm like, the water's too cold. But that's me. But for us, that's really, that's really the joy. And Betsy is on here. Betsy is recruiter at our partner MBA, and we're about ready to merge. And I'm sure she can, agree with me. For us, what really brings us joy is connecting the dots. Finding a hospital that has a need, finding a doctor that needs a home, and finding them a good home, right? And making sure it's a good match. The last thing we want to do is make bad matches, right? We don't want, bad matches, and anybody that's spent any time in a hospital, it breeds toxicity, right? And that just breeds a horrible work environment for everybody, across the board. And that's what we don't want. So for us, it's about, we're not trying to, fill holes. We're trying to find people homes, and vice versa. So that's really what it's about for us. And so the interview process, like our doctors aren't widgets. We're not trying to put you here and put you there. It's really, let's have a conversation. Let's figure out where it is going to be home for you and what's going to make sense. Through the interview process, we tend to allow time for our doctors to, maybe they have a spouse or a partner. We want them to come along with you for the interview process. We want you to see the area that you're going to be living and working, right? This is a huge decision, right? It's probably the one of the biggest decisions you've made thus far in your life, right? So we want to make sure that we're helping you and give you the tools. We have doctors oftentimes that, we schedule them to meet with it could be an apartment complex because they're looking for an apartment so they can tour some apartments, whatever it might be. We try to help that. We've had doctors that have small children. We try to set them up with the school district. I don't know what's happening with that with COVID, but, we try to really make sure that we're bringing everything to the table, because you're not just agreeing to the hospital, right? Obviously you spend a lot of time at the hospital, but it's also a new city, a new area. It's a new family, right? Because you spend a lot of time with these people. And so we want to make sure that you're really interviewing. It's the whole process. You're interviewing the city, the hospital, the doctors, everything.
Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys, Carrie and Dr. Anastasio and Betsy and Doug. I think that he hopped off. Thank you guys for, answering all the questions for today and for being a proud supporter and gold partner of Black DVM Network. So I put the job listing link in the chat, and you can find Carrie's information there. She also put that information in the chat. So if you guys have any questions about Catalyst, you can always reach out to her. And the Catalyst program also has an email address. And then if you're looking to learn more about Compassion First, definitely reach out to her about that also. But with that being said, I will say again, thank you guys so much for your time. I'm going to stop the recording.